Welcome everybody to the latest Whiskey Advent Calendar video. Tonight is going to be a good one. It's different than anything we've done before. It's going to be different than anything we're doing from here on out. This is one of my favorite whiskeys for the price, no doubt. Let's just get right into it. Today we are going to be tasting Ardbeg 10. This is a Scotch. It's a Scotch from the west coast of Scotland, from a little island called Islay, which is really known for making peated Scotches. Think big, bold, smoky, campfirey, sometimes iodine Band-Aid. It sounds gross, but it's actually in a really good way. Those sorts of Scotches. They almost always get their flavor from a peating process. And peat, it's this amalgamation of organic material that kind of coalesces and decays over a really long period of time. It reminds me a little bit of oil, but it's not what it is. And they dig that stuff up from the bogs, the swamps over there. They dry it out, and then they're able to use that as a fuel for drying the barley on the malting floors. So basically what they're doing is they're just smoking the barley with this peat, and that's what gives Scotch, peated Scotches, their really intense, smoky, bold, peaty flavor. And that's what we're dealing with here. Ardbeg, they are owned by the same company that Glenmorangie is owned by. They have a core range of, I believe, now six. They just released a really expensive one. Six Scotches that are available all the time, are released, consistently on a regular basis. But this is really their flagship one. It's the mainstay. It's the 10, the Ardbeg 10, 10 years old, non-chill filtered, 46% ABV. It's a delicious dram. I've had it a bunch. Let's pour it up right now. So if you've never had a peated Scotch before, you're probably going to be taken aback just from pouring this thing in the glass. It's pungent. I really love it. I remember the first time I ever had a peated Scotch. It wasn't an Ardbeg. It was this other brand called a Lefroy. And as soon as I smelled it and tasted it, I was like, holy crap. I didn't know alcohol could do this. I didn't know you could make a whiskey that tasted so different than anything else I had ever had. And I think that moment is when I really truly fell headfirst in love with whiskey, and definitely when I really got into it and got into Scotch in particular, which started me off on this journey. So okay, we can take a look here. And one thing you might notice about Scotches, and this one's no exception, I don't know if it'll focus in on this or not, but if you look at the color there, it's really light. It's almost like urine if you've been drinking enough water. And it's different than like bourbons or ryes, most of the things we've had so far, which are darker, more caramel in color. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of these Scotches, most of them in fact, they're aged in barrels that have already been used to age some other spirit, oftentimes bourbon. So when you have a spirit that's already aged in the barrel, it's going to draw a lot of that color and a lot of that flavor out of it initially. So the barrel that you're left with, it's not going to be as intense flavors. It's not going to be as intense of a color, but you're also going to be picking up some of the flavor from the spirit that was in there and some of the residual spirit that might be left in the wood. So with Scotch, you'll often see these bigger age statements than you'll find in bourbon. And that's one of the reasons, is because it's drawing flavor from wood that's already had a lot of, for lack of a better term, flavor drawn from it. And because the climate in Scotland is not like the climate in Kentucky and these other bourbon producing regions where it can get really, really hot and cause the wood to expand and contrast and the spirit to go in and out of it and to draw a lot more of that flavor out. That doesn't happen quite as much. So you need a longer amount of time for the whiskey to really mature and to take on a lot of the influence from the wood. Okay, well, that's enough talking about Scotch. Let's smell this thing and give it a try. Yeah, right off the bat, oh, that intense smokiness, and there's a sweetness to it as well if you can get past the smoke. And it's not quite a campfire sort of smoke or like a peatiness. It's a little different. Maybe draws the line between, this is going to sound weird, but like an iodine or a Band 80 flavor and a campfire. I think Ardbeg does a good job of being in between and have a lot of sweetness to back it up. Let's give it a taste. Sweet, and then fills it with smoke. It took me a while to taste the sweetness in any kind of these peated whiskeys, but when I taste Ardbeg now, and some other ones that we'll talk about in a second, and when I taste Ardbeg 10, I mean, and some other ones we'll talk about in a second, I notice that sweetness a lot more now, and the smoke becomes almost secondary on the palate and is really primarily on the nose. Delicious. I really love this stuff. It's about a $60 bottle for tax, and I think you're going to be hard pressed to find better money spent than $60 on a bottle like this. I always want to have at least one Ardbeg on my shelf, and this will almost always be the one because it's standard. It's not too expensive. You can find it in most, like, even grocery stores carry this. It's just delicious. But maybe peated isn't your thing. Maybe smoky isn't your thing. So you'd be pleased to know that we don't have any other peated scotches that we're doing on the Advent calendar for that reason. I know it's really off-putting to some people. What do you do if you like this Ardbeg? So, I mean, the obvious answer is try to find more Ardbegs. They have two other scotches in their line that are somewhat affordable that are not barrel strength or cask strength, but I don't think they really measure up to this one. So my recommendation, if you've had peated whiskey before and you know that Ardbeg in particular is your jam, that you move on up to one of two options. And I've got one of them here. This is the Ardbeg Corrie Vrecken. Very similar bottle, just a different name. Corrie Vrecken, I think it's named after a whirlpool north of Islay, which is where this is made, in another island called Jura. I think I'm pronouncing that right. This is delicious. It's incredibly sweet and smoky as well. I think there is a little bit more of like a oiliness or an iodine to it than the Ardbeg 10, but it'll hit you hard too. 57.1%, so you're really getting up there. It's also non-chill filtered, really tasty. If I had to choose though, my favorite Ardbeg, it would be another one that has a similar alcohol content as the Corrie Vrecken. It's called the Uigeadail. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. The first time I had it, I tasted it, and this was before I was too into Scotch, and it tasted like candied bacon, like over a campfire. It was so good. Definitely my favorite Ardbeg, but Corrie Vrecken's a close second too. But maybe you haven't, this is the first peated whiskey you've ever had, the first peated Scotch, you like it, but you want to figure out, okay, before you go whole hog into cask strength, you know, maybe you want to figure out what peated Scotch is best for you. Okay, so first is the Laphroaig 10. Now, this is the cask strength. I would avoid that if you're just trying to dabble and explore different ones that you might like. The only difference is the normal 10 is not going to have this green stripe. And honestly, you're probably not going to find this in most stores, but you will find the Laphroaig 10 in a lot, maybe even most stores. I think it's around 60 or 70. I don't think I'd pay more than 60 for it, because if you wait long enough, you can find it for 60 in some spots. This is more leaning toward the iodine, like Band 80 flavors, which sounds so weird, but trust me, it's pretty good. It's really good. It's a different flavor profile than the Ardbeg, even though it is still peated. Another one I recommend if you're really into peated is the Lagavulin 16. Just this one right here. And really, I mean, any Lagavulin. Like if the Lagavulin 16, it might be kind of cost prohibitive because it's around, I've never seen it, I don't think cheaper than $100. But it is widely recognized as being not only the flagship Scotch of Lagavulin, but the best value as well. The Lagavulin 16, if you don't mind spending the money, is delicious. This very much is leaning toward the like sweet campfire sort of smokiness. Maybe you're the guy, maybe I should have started with this, or gal, who does not, you don't want an intense peat experience. You want to see what a little bit of peat tastes like, and go from there, you know, and kind of work your way up to these heavier peats if it ends up being for you. Most things from Highland Park. This is a Highland Park 18, but I'd recommend probably the Highland Park 12. It looks exactly the same as this, except instead of the 18, there's a 12 there. I think that's about $60 as well, maybe 70, not quite sure. It's really good. It's lightly peated Scotch that has, the peat profile is really different. It's like a heathery peat, like a floral peat, and it's not super strong. So I think Highland Park is a pretty good introduction to peat, and it's excuse me, just a really great bottle. And then lastly, if you want to get a little bit weirder with peat, I'm spending a lot of time in this video just because it's the only peated, you know, smoky Scotch video we're doing. But there are some American malts that are peated that taste funky is the best word I can describe. It's very different. So yeah, Seattle's very own Westland Distillery. They have a peated version of their normal single malt, American single malt. So basically America's version of Scotch that I've never tried. I want to after having this. This is the Gariana 5th edition. There is some peat in here too. It just tastes different. And I thought maybe it was unique to Westland, but I had a Colorado single malt called Stranahan's, I believe, one time, and I got a similar weird funkiness. So maybe there's something to American peat, maybe there's something to American malt when peat's applied to it. I don't know. But these are all different peated Scotches, or at least peated single malts, that are going to give you a very different experience while still scratching that smoky itch for you. So I hope you enjoyed the Ardbeg. I hope you'll enjoy exploring some of these other options later on. And if you have any questions, if you have any strong opinions, obviously, you know, feel free to leave a comment, but shoot me a text, get in touch with me. I'd be happy to talk with you about any of this stuff and give you a pour if you're interested. Cheers, everyone. Merry Christmas.